What's up everyone, welcome back to the channel. Boozer here, thanks for stopping by. Now this video is kind of a part 2 video to my ultimate tier list video that I just put out, so make sure you guys check that out. I'm gonna put that in the somewhere up here. I do apologize, I did miss about a half dozen fusions. Notable ones being Lady Noelle and Thor. Both of them are S tier champions, of course. Lady Noelle more so S tier with Sir Nicholas, but I did add them in a note in the pinned comment, so make sure you guys check that out as well for a more complete list. In this video, the part 2, the follow-up video, I'm going to try to make this more of a meeting expectations, below expectations, and exceeding expectations kind of list for all of the fusions that we've ever had. Now, where do these expectations come from? I will say that I've been around for about 90% of all the fusions, and I've been following the general raid community and consensus for how they feel about these things for a long time, just because obviously I'm interested in doing the fusion, so I want to hear what other people think about them. And very often, people are wrong, right? People are wrong all the time, and that's not a good or bad thing. We obviously give our opinions based on limited information and all that. And some champions over time improve or devalue. So I thought it would be interesting to kind of highlight the fusion champions, because obviously these are the more accessible champions for everyone, excuse me. Therefore, it probably impacts more people. So I thought this would be a good exercise to show everybody. Now, obviously there will be some, of my own opinions mixed into this. And obviously I'm not the bank of all community insights since the beginning of time. So there's obviously going to be some room for error here. But let's jump into this tier list. So first, I got exceeding expectations, we got meeting expectations, below expectations, and then to be determined. So to be determined would be basically something that we haven't yet realized yet. For example, maybe like a recent fusion. Anyways, let's get started here. I'm going to rapid fire this. So Lady Noelle was expected to be good, and she is good. She meets the expectations. Stalk the Broken. Now, I think some people thought Stalk the Broken would be absolutely insane, kind of like Theodore, but to me, he definitely did not live up to that. So I think personally below expectations. Gretel was kind of a lockout champion, damage dealer, not as good as Alice actually, to be honest, but I don't think people expected a lot from her, so I think she did meet expectations. Jeroboam, now he is a turn meter boosting champion for the Ogren tribes. He was expected to be pretty bad, and I think he did meet those expectations of being pretty bad. Thor, incredible AoE damage dealer here, S tier champion that I left out of the initial ultimate tier list guide. He was shown to be absolutely absurd in terms of overall damage, especially for areas where there's multiple targets. So I think he definitely lived up to that. It was hard to exceed the expectations because his expectations were so high already. Next up, we have Scorid here. He does bring AoE Hex, and he is a damage dealer, but I think people were expecting a little bit more out of him. He doesn't deal as much damage outside of just his Hex application, so I think he did fail to meet expectations a little bit. Up next, we have Shayak. Shayak honestly was not a very good fusion champion without the dog. By himself, he really just brings turn meter and AoE block buffs. He doesn't really bring too much else. I know people will say that he brings a lot, but honestly, for a slot on your Hydra team, for example, which is his best spot, I don't think he brings too much. However, I don't think anybody was expecting him to do too much by himself, and we were waiting for his partner dog. With the partner dog, he definitely exceeded expectations. He became an incredible companion to the dog, and together they are absolutely absurd in terms of overall output for damage. Now, up next, we have Incarnate. Incarnate is supposed to support the Arbiter, but she's just so bad, but everyone really was down on her and said she was really bad. And yes, she met expectations and she is really bad. Up next, we got Sir Nick. Sir Nick was considered very good as a fusion, so he did meet expectations, but now he is definitely exceeding expectations because of a recent buff to his partner champion, Lady Noelle. So now he is currently exceeding what we were expecting from him, which is great for everybody that got him. Up next, we got Shamrock. Shamrock overall, I think, is an okay champion. He does have some outdated moves, but he does fulfill what he needs to do most of the time. So I think for the most part, he kind of met expectations. Foley, one of the earlier fusions here, I think generally he did have some high expectations, and I believe he did not meet all of them, especially over time. Molly, being a solid champion, was a bit of a arena champion as well. Definitely met expectations for all areas. Still performs relatively well. Harvest Jack, usually these Halloween fusions get hyped up a little bit. Harvest Jack definitely did not perform as well as we would have thought. Brackets, same kind of idea. Multi-hitters, obviously with Stone Skin nowadays, he did not age well. Now we have Tormund. Tormund was expected to be pretty good, but he was not expected to be that good to receive so many nerfs. And now with the Hilvi synergies that they have together, he's even better than anybody could have expected. So definitely exceeding expectations there. Rhodos, again, Rhodos was completely panned as a fusion in terms of overall community sentiment. He's been nerfed many times and still is insanely good. He belongs in the exceed category. Cillian, the Unlucky, was not a very well received fusion, but he did just meet those expectations of being not very good. Skullord Vogal, he was pretty bad on expectations and he met them, but now he's definitely a lot better, especially with his rework to his passive. So he's currently exceeding those expectations. Driptuck, obviously not very good, but very good in certain applications, but he was expected to be meh. Cantor the Cyclone, same thing, a pretty average fusion, but expected to be so. Now, Wixwell, I think generally was a average fusion. We knew there was going to be something going on with his shields, but we didn't know to the extent of how crazy his kit would be. So definitely heavily exceeded our expectations. Estrid also was deemed a pretty good champion, but I think overall she did exceed expectations as well. She's an excellent performer in the areas where she's basically targeted to perform well in. Armanz, Armanz was expected to be insane. I don't know why you would ever skip this fusion, and he still exceeded expectations. He's an absolutely insane champion, not just for arena, but for PvE content and just progressing through the game. Insane champion. Personally speaking, Ancora, I was kind of down on her. I thought her kit was kind of plain, but her revivability is incredibly strong, and her A1, actually, the cooldown reduction on your own abilities, really strong, so she exceeded my expectations as well. Zinigir, I thought Zinigir would be better than she actually is, but currently I don't really see her meeting my expectations. Blizzard, I think most people were kind of down on Blizzard. I'm not particularly sure why, but there was actually some pretty cool applications for his kit, such as, for example, soloing Sand Devil, and of course he can cheese other areas as well. So I think he definitely exceeded expectations. Ugir, pretty ugly champion, to be honest. I don't know if he was expected to do very well. I don't think people were very into him, so I think he met his low expectations. Bambus, I think Bambus had slightly higher expectations and was not able to meet them, basically because of his kit and his longer cooldowns on his skill durations. The buff increased duration. I think he definitely belongs in the below expectation category. Timid the Fool was kind of expected to be kind of mid or bad, and he definitely met those expectations. Islan, I think people were mostly down on him for the most part. They didn't really like his kit for whatever reason, but I think he kind of exceeded people's expectations a little bit, especially with how strong you can actually make him in terms of a solo champion, like a arena solo wall, for example. Building a crazy defense, and then he can heal up quite a bit. So I think he kind of exceeded people's expectations. I think most people had him pretty down. Up next, we have Emic here. I think Emic, a lot of people knew that he was going to be good, but I think a lot of people kind of shied away from him after they nerfed his A1. I didn't think that was that big of a deal because the rest of his kit was really strong. So in the end, he actually, I think, exceeded what everyone thought he would be because his kit wraps it up really well. He has the cooldown reduction and he has the unkillable buff in one champion. Whereas usually when you need those two things, it's two champions. So for him, I think he definitely exceeded what people were expecting. Newt, I mean, I think everyone knew that Newt was going to be absolutely nuts, but I think to what level of nutness or Newtness, we did not know. But for me, he definitely exceeded expectations still, just with his overall staying power in the game and how much we actually use this guy. Up next, we have Razovar. I think people were thinking he was going to be a really good damage dealer, and he actually really is. He brings good buffs, good debuffs, so I think he met all expectations. Supreme Elhain. I don't think anybody would think that she was insane, but I don't think anybody thought she was bad, so I think she basically just met expectations. Owella, I think people were kind of down on her. A lot of people skipped her. They didn't like her as a fusion, but definitely she exceeded expectations because she brings one of the rare increased resistance buffs as well as buff duration increase, and that's proven to be very strong, especially nowadays. So for me, she has exceeded expectations. Now here's an interesting champion, Pythion. Pythion was actually hyped up quite a bit, and he was actually deemed probably one of the best fusions of all time at the time that he was released. Now, it's hard to say whether he actually met that. He actually is a very good champion, so I would say he's probably more than likely meeting expectations, but I would say he maybe even falls below expectations slightly because his expectations were so high at that point. Some people were saying he's better than Duchess, so I wouldn't be surprised if he belongs in the below expectation. Up next, we have Nishak. Nishak, to me, I thought he was a great champion, especially when, we first had our hands on him. And I think he definitely exceeded expectations, especially nowadays with how Stone Skin is kind of the top place where you kind of use bombs. So Nishak definitely found more value even there. Up next, we have Morgaine. So Morgaine brings the irresistible passive heal reduction, which actually has shot up in value a lot. So for her, I think people were kind of meh on her because she's kind of just a generic speed booster, not too much better than High Cocoon, I remember people were saying. But based on the heal reduction, she does bring some CC as well. She's definitely exceeded expectations all this time. Mariannex, I think she was hyped up because she had decreased defense with Hex in one ability on a 3-turn cooldown, which is actually okay, especially before with how, the curse set didn't exist in its current form. But recently, obviously, Hex sets are everywhere nowadays. You don't need a champion to have it. So her value has fallen off quite a bit. And she was never actually used to her full potential anyways. So she was never, she never met her expectations. Up next, we have Lanathro. Lanathro was bombed heavily when he was first introduced. Basically, his ally protection or ally attack was not up to par with other ally attacks, and the rest of his kit was just very plain Jane. But the fact that his ally attack brings the whole team actually makes him one of the handful of champions that has that, and that actually increased his value quite a bit once Hard Fire Knight came into the game. So he definitely exceeded expectations significantly. After that, we have Mighty Uko here. Mighty Uko was probably deemed one of the best fusions of all time when he first came out. He was kind of nerfed a little bit, but it didn't affect him that much. I think he didn't meet overall his expectations. He's still a very, very good champion. Helicath was expected to be insanely good, and he is insanely good. So we move on from that. We got Tomb Lord here with the irresistible HP burn. He's a solid champion, nothing too fancy or anything about that. And he's one of the more accessible irresistible HP AoE burn champions in the game before. Up next, we have Bivol. Bivol, I think, was just, he's just a solid champion and he met all of those expectations. Karato, I'm not too sure how people felt about Karato. I think most people were not too interested in him. And it's kind of hard to kind of fail those low expectations. So I think his expectations were low and he kind of met them. Nari the Lucky, he was kind of interesting because he brought decreased resistance. And that may be one of the things that people were interested in for him. And I think people actually did him to try to get, that debuff into their roster. But honestly, he has not lived up to any of those expectations. So he definitely falls below. Opardin Clanfather, I think generally was just not well received. He did receive a buff, which makes him a little bit better. But honestly, he just met the expectations that he was just going to be not a great champion. Up next, we have Galus here. So Galus, I think, was kind of hammed up a little bit. And I don't think he actually lived up to those expectations. There's some issues with his kit, such as the 2-turn duration bomb detonation. But he does have ways to trigger it by basically dying with his passive or his A3 single target triggering, but I don't think he performed as well as people were expecting him to, so I think he falls below expectations. Tatura, solid champion with a 3-turn increased defense block debuff, was very good for players back in the day when Clan Boss was very important, so I think he met expectations. Vlad here was actually not very well received when he was first released, but I think he found his place now, so definitely exceeding expectations. Sigmund here is the high shield. He actually has some parts of his kit that are actually okay for areas like Clan Boss, which was important at the time of his introduction. But I think he does fall behind in terms of expectations just because his kit did not age well. He doesn't have 100% provoke as well. And the best thing about his kit is 3-turn shield and strengthen are just not that impactful nowadays. So I'm going to put him in the below expectation category. Rorik, I think people were pretty down on him. I think people had some damage tests about him, and then the community was saying, oh, he does do some good damage against Clan Boss, but he's not significantly important in any other way other than just being a damage dealer for Clan Boss. So I think expectations being even higher than normal for him are not met. So I would say he would fall in the below category. Mother Cybele is an interesting one. I think everybody panned her in the beginning. People didn't like her at all, but she definitely found her place in this game. A lot of different areas that benefit from decreased speed. The AoE is very good as well. And then she could even do some cheesy stuff with her Revive on Death buff as well. So she was heavily exceeded expectations. Versolf here, he was supposed to be a very good Clan Boss champion or wave clear or damage dealer. He was definitely pumped up a bit, and I think he definitely did not meet those expectations here. So for me, he definitely falls below expectations. Herndig, solid champion, pretty good for general support or just for damage. I think he met expectations. Ruel's an interesting one. Like I said, he's one of the first Hex champions. He's supposed to be a big damage dealer. He does require 2 turns to set up or a Hex champion to go before him. At that time, there was just not many Hex application champions. So his expectations were quite high actually for a damage dealer. He also has the setup Hex for other Hex champions that needed it. But for me, he definitely did not meet expectations in any of those areas. Yoshi was kind of pumped up a little bit as well. His passive got a lot of focus, as well as his increased attack and increased accuracy. But honestly, he hasn't really found his place outside of maybe like very specific bomb comps, maybe a lockout champion, for example, that can utilize the increased accuracy. But for me, I think he fell below expectations a little bit. Brogni was touted to be absolutely insane, and I think he was absolutely insane at the time of his fusion, so I think he definitely met expectations. Iron Brago was showcased pretty well. He performed well overall, and I think he met expectations overall. Pixneal, I think most people didn't like Pixneal right away. She was buffed not too long ago, but at the time she was just basically determined to be one of the worst fusions of all time, and she met those expectations. We have Elegaeus here, again, one of the worst fusions of all time. He was buffed recently, and now he's a lot better, but he's still not great. So I would say he met expectations of being very bad. Astrolon, decent damage dealer, has the AoE stun. Hasn't aged well, but this isn't really a tier list about aging well. It's just about expectations. So I think he met overall expectations. Virgumcar. So Virgumcar is kind of interesting. I think people tried to look for reasons to go for him, or look for reasons for him to be good. At the time, I think people were kind of saying, oh, he's going to be really good for Doom Tower because we don't know what Doom Tower is going to be like, etc., etc. But I think he still failed to meet expectations even for any kind of role at all. So he's just generally a bad champion at that time. He was buffed and he has been a lot better now, but at that time he's just awful. Dracul, same thing. He was actually kind of pumped up a little bit for his block damage and all that, but definitely not a very good kit and definitely didn't live up to any expectations there. Up next, we have Titus. So Titus, basically, we knew the business with Titus. He was going to be insane because of the shield stuff, shield mechanics that were happening. He was touted as a must fuse. Like personally, I even called it a must fuse for everybody. Anybody that wanted to, basically contribute in a late game capacity or end game capacity, I think he's a must fuse. So it's really hard to basically exceed those kind of crazy expectations. So for me, he definitely met those expectations. So up next, I'm going to leave Cassandra here for a sec. Up next, we have Croz, the bomb champion from the Ogren tribes. I honestly didn't like this champion because of his 2-turn duration, but I do think he has a place in the Ogren tribes. I'm not too sure in terms of my overall expectations for him. I think he's close to a meet, but I'm going to say to be determined. And then we have Yuki Masa here. Yuki Masa's kit reads pretty well, but he's in a pretty stacked faction. However, he does have a mechanic in his kit, a revive, which the faction doesn't really have a lot of. I also kind of like his hybrid kit where he's an attacker, but he does bring some support. So he could fit kind of well in these more restrictive content areas like Centranos or Grim Forest. So I'm not too sure. Expectations were kind of varied, a little bit sky high, a little bit on the low side. So I would say to be determined, but I'd say most likely he probably meets most expectations at the time. Esme, I think people were mostly down on Esme, and I think she kind of met those expectations so far. Donatello, I think people were actually not as gung-ho on him as I thought. I think he's an absolutely insane champion, and I think he definitely exceeded expectations. He's fit in so many different teams nowadays. It's crazy, and I think people could have been higher on him. Up next, we have Lysanthier. Lysanthier does bring the AoE decreased speed, which is really important for Hydra. He's basically a Hydra specialist. I don't think a lot of people liked him. I don't think a lot of people went for him, but I think he does perform pretty well. So I would say he probably exceeded expectations. Up next, we have Ishiyama here. I think people were saying he's going to be pretty bad. And yeah, so far he's been pretty bad. So nothing too crazy there. Maria, I think Maria was a little bit overhyped, to be honest. In the highest applications, like the highest players, they can probably get the most out of Maria. But I think for most normal people, they can't. And when you see people getting the most out of a champion, but it's basically because their account is so good, it's kind of hard to discern sometimes. So I think expectations for her were sky high, and to me, I don't think she's met them. Don't get me wrong, she's a good champion, she's a great champion, but I just don't think she lived up to those sky high expectations. Crocad, the dog partner to Shayak, I think he's really good. By himself, he's totally solid. With the partner, he's absolutely insane. To me, he's totally exceeded expectations. He was actually nuts, but he's actually nuts in so many areas that he actually really carried my account. So I'm really a big fan of Crocad there. Up next, Mad Hatter. So Mad Hatter, I thought, like I covered Mad Hatter, as a content creator and stuff, and I love this champion. I was like, yes, this champion is, I was short of saying must do. He's a great champion, brings lots of value and all that. But I was hearing a lot of people really down on this champion. I just didn't understand. Maybe I was missing something. I remember I asked some of the content creators, I'm like, am I missing something here? This champion looks amazing. And sure enough, he is amazing. Like outside of, even without Titus, without Wixwell, he's still an amazing champion. And I think people's expectations of him were quite low. So I want to say that he did exceed expectations. Not necessarily my own, but I think as a community, he did exceed expectations. Now, up next, we have Fabian. Fabian, I think everybody thought was going to be a must-fuse, incredible champion, but to what extent? People were saying that he was worse than Arman's, and I wasn't so sure. So to me, I thought he was going to be an insanely must-do champion, but I think for me, he has exceeded expectations even in that front. He's proven to be incredibly versatile, incredibly good, incredibly annoying, and definitely a must-fuse for that timeline. Up next, we have Granite. Granite, he's failed expectations as a nuker, but he does have lots of use. He's not a bad champion. I think most people were expecting him to be a nuker, but I think there's other applications for his kit, and I think he's definitely performed pretty good, so he's met expectations. And lastly, Tholen. I think Tholen was expected to be a very good damage dealer, and he does perform very good in that regards. So I think overall he has met expectations. All right, guys, and our last champion here, Cassandra. I'm going to put her in the to be determined because we yet to know whether she met our expectations or not. The expectations do seem to be kind of varied for her, but I think most are pretty below average expectations for her. Will she exceed those expectations? I think she would, but we will see. Anyways, guys, this is the final list. Like I said, this is about expectations when when we first get our hands on the champion and we give our first community impressions of everything. What do you guys think about this list? Obviously, the to be determined category mostly has some of the newer champions. We haven't yet to see their full potential. I think the big takeaway here is champions that meet and then champions that exceed. So these are the two positive categories. So if you're basically, advised this champion is good, this champion is bad, and it meets those expectations, then you have all the information you're ready, to use at your disposal to get or to skip this champion. If it exceeds your expectations, then that's a good thing, right? Now you have, a higher value champion on your hands. That's great. But the champions that we have to be careful of are champions that fall below expectations, whether they're supposed to be really good and then, they actually don't end up being very good. So I think for the most part here, the community sentiment for most of the champions are generally correct. I would say probably about 75% of the time they're correct or better. And in the case of, some of these champions that actually fall below expectations, it's because their expectations are just way too high. They're still good champions. For example, like Pythion, Maria, for example, they just had sky high expectations, but they're still good champions, even if they fail to meet those sky high expectations. Anyways, guys, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully it was like a slightly different video and it provided you guys a little bit of a history lesson, a little bit of information for you guys. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think. Which champion on your roster exceeded your expectations or which champions failed to meet your expectations? That'll be interesting to hear because everybody has different expectations, different reasons why they go for certain champions. And maybe, hopefully, a video like this will give you guys some ideas to bring some champions up or to take a second look at some champions that weren't performing very well for your roster and maybe bring them up into your full-time lineups and maybe they'll perform better. Just something to think about, guys. Anyways, thanks for watching. I appreciate you all. If you guys enjoyed this content, make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps me out. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys in the next video.